Hello, and welcome to On My Shelf. Today I'm talking about a beautiful young adult book about mental illness, grief, and the relationships that bind us together. How It Feels to Float by Helena Fox is the story of Biz. She recently lost her dad, but that's okay. He visits her as a ghost and tells her about who she was as a kid. And she has her mom and the twins, and her best friend Grace, to help her through the grief. The problem is, Biz doesn't talk to anyone about her dark and sometimes strange thoughts. And she especially doesn't tell them about her dad being back from the grave. One night, Biz nearly loses herself in the ocean, and then nearly loses herself in the sand, and she finds everything slipping away. Friendships, logic, and reason, and her dad. Comfort goes too. So she starts to sink, and she begins to wonder if it would just be easier to float away, or look for her dad and bring him back, or maybe find another way that hasn't shown itself yet. It's a story of grief and love and intergenerational mental illness, and the way that mental illness binds but also repels. It's a stunning representation of living with mental illness and loss. Helena Fox is also the author of The Quiet and the Loud, which just published this year and which is now at the top of my reading pile. I'm really looking forward to diving in. Here are 3 reasons I love this book. Number 1, the poetic language. It's probably no surprise to you that I am a sucker for poetic language. This book had so much poetic language, and not in a way that romanticizes mental illness, but in a way that makes it more real. Mental illness is strange. Sometimes you think in poetry and metaphor, and sometimes you think very logically and bluntly. Fox changed the language of the book depending on Biz's mood, and that enhanced the poetic nature. Biz had weird connections and strange little mind blips, and thoughts that would run a certain course and would turn funny or dark depending on the situation and her mood. It was just really well done. Number 2, a long book that didn't feel long. I love when books fly by, even though they're long, and this one fit that bill. I'll talk more in depth about some of these things in a minute, but here's why it flew by. Biz's voice was spectacularly human and teenage, and funny and serious and all the things in between. The chapters were short and broken into even shorter sections. Fox included some mysteries through characters, by telling only portions of character stories, and in disappearances and appearances. All of those elements made the book fly. Number 3, serious subject matter. I love books that tackle mental illness and living with it in a realistic way. We all need books we can escape into, that are joys to read and provide escape from the problems of the world. But I'm also a big fan of books that tackle hard, serious things. Biz's story examines the grief of losing a parent and the intergenerational mental illness that tends to hang like a shadow over families. It celebrated the ties of family and the friendships that can ground us even in difficult times. And it looked at a young woman's identity as she was trying to figure out who she was and who she loved and how to live in the aftermath of tragedy. Teens need those books too. From a craft perspective, there was a lot to love about this book. First of all, the short sections and chapters. You're probably getting tired of hearing me say this, but short chapters are so great. Part of it is probably because I have a lot of kids, and when books are written in short chapters, I can get a small section or chapter read before the next interruption, which feels like a victory. But also for young adults and adolescents who are bombarded with distractions, short chapters help them feel like they're making progress on a book. Short chapters also help with pacing. We can end a chapter or section in the middle of a cliffhanger, and readers will want to keep reading. This was not a short book, but it felt short because the chapters and sections within the chapters were no more than 1 or 2 pages long. The second craft piece I really enjoyed was mystery. In particular, a mysterious character. Biz meets Jasper, a new kid with a limp, and he's sort of a mysterious character in the beginning because she doesn't know much about him, and he's quiet, he doesn't stand out, he doesn't speak up in class, he kind of just keeps to himself. She found herself preoccupied with him, wondering who he was and how he got his limp. And as a reader, I found myself also wondering about him because there were so many unanswered questions. I wanted to know if he was an honorable character or a despicable one. I wanted to know if he would be a friend or a foe. I wanted to know how he'd gotten that limp. Introducing mystery like this, especially in a character, increases the intrigue of a story and keeps a reader turning pages so they can get their questions answered. And the third piece was voice. I loved Biz's voice. It belonged to a teenager, first of all, and second of all, she was clearly depressed, but her voice still had humor to it. It was delightful and lightened the mood in some of the darkest places. Take this quote, for example. "The corona of my immense positivity almost burns us both to a crisp." She's not being sarcastic, she's playing a part. And she's sort of making fun of herself for it. I loved that there were these moments of levity within a very serious book. So here's what we can take away from How It Feels to Float. Number 1, change language depending on a character's mood. We do this in real life, don't we? When we're angry, we have shorter sentences and more matter-of-fact phrases. When we're happy, we gush. When we're struggling, our language can be all over the place. Fox's use of language reminded me to pay attention to my own language, especially in first-person stories. We can use our language to reinforce what characters are feeling, just like we use our language in real life to reinforce what we're feeling. It reminded me to look for places where I can use that technique and further draw readers into the character's head and into the story. Number 2, keep them short. I'm talking about chapters and sections within chapters and even scenes themselves. I'm starting to practice this more in my own writing, and I am loving it. Short chapters help increase tension and pacing, and like I said before, they give readers a natural stopping place where they can put the book aside and feel excited about picking it back up, because their commitment to a chapter is a few pages, not 45. Also, scenes don't have to be really, really long to get the point across. You don't have to show every single thing that happened, or record every single thing that was said when a character had a conversation with their grandmother. It's okay to take a small slice and keep that on the page while ditching the rest. Nothing clutters a story as much as unnecessary details and dialogue. Number 3, don't forget the humor in difficult stories. Obviously, not every difficult story will lend itself to humor, but more and more I've been trying to balance my hard stories with the quirky personality of whoever is telling the story. It all comes down to voice. In this story, Biz wasn't laughing much, but she had the kind of personality that said certain things in a humorous way. So I'd find myself chuckling unexpectedly. That's what I want to do for my readers, make them laugh and make them cry. This book reminded me to look for ways I can do that, whether with situations or voice, or in supporting characters, or with extra writings on the side. Serious stories need moments of levity, or they risk getting too bogged down with emotion. Also, humor just brings me joy. So I've begun asking myself, where can I infuse a little humor to bring my reader and myself a little more joy? That's it for today's On My Shelf. If you're interested in hearing an author's perspective on books, movies, and sometimes TV shows, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.